Before we get into this video, I want to give a quick segment to our channel's #1 affiliate product. Fabletics is a sportswear brand that solely focuses on making quality clothing for athletes, gym goers, or just casual fitness junkies. Fabletics Men's The One Shorts offers a lightweight and quick-drying fabric for even the sweatiest gym goers. They also use antimicrobial and anti-odor technology, which provides extra support against those smelly odors from even the most intense exercise. Lastly, not to mention their high-stretch fabric for comfortability and space. And my favorite is their zip-up pockets to hold your items securely so you don't have to worry about damaging your personal items. If you are interested in these, the link for these shorts will be at the top of my description. And as always, enjoy these scary, true stories. It was a group of us went out to the woods last night, a pre-July 4th cookout. Spur-of-the-moment deal. Me, Liza, Arya, Chet, the gang, all save for Elijah and Marnie, who were off doing their own thing. God knows what. We drove out there, and by the time we got unpacked, got the tent set up, and got the campfire going, the sun was beginning to set. We were in our spot, the one I don't tell nobody about because it's lakeside, it's fairly clean, and we don't want any other folks messing up our shit. We cooked hot dogs and burgers over the campfire, brought the beers out the cooler, proceeded to get slightly full and slightly drunk. Nothing to excess, just a nice buzz. Chet and Daria smoked a couple joints a ways from us, but the rest of us didn't touch it. While the others were off somewhere smoking, Abe, in all his glory, suggests we go swimming. I checked my phone. Gone midnight. July 4th was all about letting loose. Seemed a good idea at the time. Some of us stripped down to our underwear, some down to the buff. Not saying who did what, not relevant. Just, the three of us rushed to the water's edge and splashed our way into the glittering black lake. The lake is fine for swimming, as long as you don't go out too deep. We've done it enough times. Hell, in the daylight hours, people bring their kids down here to teach them how to swim. It's where we all learned. It ain't a dangerous lake. Ain't polluted, toxic, none of that. Sure felt it last night though. The water was thick, syrupy even. We didn't notice at first. But as Liza and I splashed each other while Abe dived under the surface, we looked at each other's skin and saw the water was sticking to us. Yeah, like it was made from oil or something viscous, oily liquid that clung to our bodies and made us look like we were coated in brown film. We were both half drunk, so maybe we didn't react with as much disgust as we should have. Liza waded over to me, and we stood there, staring at the strange water that came up just above our breasts. Liza dipped her hand into it and held it up, her palm cupped. "Dude, it's like lumpy," she slurred. We scanned the lake for Abe. A distant, dark shape crested the surface. Abe had swum out pretty far. I sniffed. The lake didn't even smell right. "I'm getting out," I told Liza. She agreed. We turned to go, our bodies causing the water to ripple. We both jumped at the same time as we set eyes on the man. I let out a little scream. Liza's hand found mine under the water. The man stood there, about a foot away from us. Neither of us had heard him approach. He was staring straight at us, his eyes wide as if in surprise, but a joyful smile split his face. He was middle-aged, clean-shaven, the hair around his temples graying. Weirder still was his clothing. He wore a full business suit, black jacket, white shirt, gray tie. He was tall. The water stopped around his abdomen, leaving brown stains on his clean, starched shirt. I noticed a biro sticking out of his jacket pocket. Liza and I both jumped and shrieked again as wordlessly, the man dropped downwards. I don't mean he dived or anything. He shot straight downwards, like the ground had opened up beneath him. If it wasn't for the fact we could just about see his shape through the discolored water, I would have thought he had disappeared into the depths. Liza grabbed my wrist and pulled me around the man. I looked over my shoulder as we waded away to see him moving slowly, strangely under the surface, as if his legs were bent and he was walking anyway. Liza tugged at me. We waited for the shore. When we had reached waist-height water, Liza fell, slipped on a rock or something, straight below the surface. She emerged a second later, spluttering and choking, spitting the foul liquid out her mouth. Her hair was matted down with the lumpy fluid that filled the lake. We stumbled to shore. Daria and Chet were sitting there, on a log beside the campfire. They were stoned, giggling at us as we stood there shivering, dripping wet and half naked. Liza began screaming at them, something about Abe. I couldn't get the sight of that man out my mind. I turned to the lake as Liza shook Daria's arm. There in the center of the lake, I saw Abe. He was standing stock still, looking back at the shore. The man in the business suit stood beside him. They were both gazing at us. Slowly, very slowly, they both raised their right hands and waved in our direction. Then, with a speed that made me gasp aloud, they both dropped beneath the surface. Daria and Chet must have observed the scene, because before I could stop them, in their stoned state, they went rushing towards the shore, shedding their clothes until, in their underwear, they dove under the water, swimming towards the spot we'd last seen Abe. I ran after them, screaming, telling them to get back. Perhaps they ignored me. Perhaps they couldn't hear me. Liza was rocking back and forth by the campfire, shivering. I rushed to the tent to find a towel to cover her bare skin. When I emerged, she'd gone. With a sinking heart, I scanned the lake. There, in the center, impossibly far away, was Liza. Beside her stood Daria and Chet. They were all staring at me, all waving. Then, like Abe and the businessman before them, they dropped beneath the oily surface. The cops didn't believe my version of events. I drove far enough into town to get reception, then made a breathless 911 call. My friends had vanished into the lake. It was a story they heard every summer, they said. Kids go out there, get drunk, get high, go for a swim, and never come up. Divers are out there now, combing the lake. So far, they've found nothing. The lady cop who's looking after me told me they said the water's fine. No oil, no viscosity. When she'd left, I flicked through the magazines in the waiting room. As I saw the familiar face, my hands began to shake, the paper flapping in my grip. His name was Greg Grenwald. He'd started a small petroleum company, which had become a huge multinational corporation. In the photo, he wore that same black suit, white shirt, gray tie. He even had the same biro in his jacket pocket. The article was a memorial. After returning to his hometown ready for a family celebration, he disappeared. They found his body in the early hours of the morning, still wearing his suit, floating face down in the lake. Our lake, 30 years ago to the day. Happy 4th of July. I will begin this story with explaining that what I am about to write, while may not be that bone-chilling, was a true experience to not only me, but a couple people around me. Everyone has their plans for Independence Day, and for a lot of us that means firework watching or launching. While my family and I would usually launch off quite a few, we weren't able to obtain any during this time because you have to go to South Carolina in order to get any, as we live in Virginia. Being July 4th, and without any fun to shoot off our own, we decided to go to a local park that has small mountains from what used to be a landfill that was hosting its own firework display for anyone to watch. By the time we got there, it was pretty packed and about 7:30. Other than the chilly winds, the night was like many other summer nights here in the city. I was only about 12 at the time, so I was absolutely impatient about the show. Alas, the display of vibrant explosions starts 10 minutes later than scheduled. Sadly, the display was not as incredible as I had imaged it, but if it had been, I wouldn't have overheard this man next to me on the phone who was trying to get connections to NASA. As everyone knows, July 4th is a national holiday, therefore any federal agencies would be closed. It then hit me that he must have a reason to try and call NASA, and luckily it did, as he was pointing out something in the sky to his young son. I immediately saw exactly what he was looking at and was just shocked in confusion. There was what appeared to be one bright light, larger than the stars by a hair, that seemed to accelerate high speed in a straight line, then disappear completely. The light would then show up again in the same spot it disappeared, and then dart off in an angle the other way and dissipate as once before. Then, once more, it lit up and darted back to the original place I saw it. I couldn't believe my eyes. Whatever I was witnessing was making complete triangles in the sky at high speeds. At this point, the man next to me was trying all sorts of observatories and space observation, which I think one of them might have been WFF. These strange lights kept going for roughly 15 to 20 minutes. They amused me so much that I completely forgot about the subpar fireworks display. The strangest part of it all was that it seemed to run over the same path that it had before. It never did anything beyond the triangular path of shooting and dimming that it had done before. It never made a sound, And if it did, it would be very possible that either the fireworks would overpower it or that it was just too far away. A few months down the line, we had gone on vacation to somewhere in North Carolina with extended family from my mom's side. Apparently one of my relatives, like a great aunt or something like that, had a friend who actually worked for NASA and overheard me talking about the story. She immediately called up her friend for me to talk to, which, being 12 and talking to a NASA employee, was the coolest thing ever. This woman had been working for NASA something like 10 to 15 years, and I never really figured out the field she was in specifically. First, I had asked her if anything was reported or seen the night of July 4th, which she softly and simply explained that there had not been anything reported. I frantically told my story the best that I could, explaining that the light would dim out, then shine again as it burst in another direction. She took a deep breath and then softly said, "Do you think they were flares?" Apparently satellites drop flares often, but for an obvious reason what I saw were no flares. She even explained that flares would only go one direction across the sky, almost reassuring me that either I did or I didn't see flares. The last thing she said to me of significance was, "Whatever you saw, you don't need to worry about it." To this day, I can still remember it clear as water. I know what I saw, and I know I wasn't the only one. I know that what I saw wasn't a plane or flares or a satellite passing over. What I saw was going at incredible amounts of speed, in the same path over and over, and violently dimming out. Now you know my story, and maybe, just maybe, someone had the same experience as me. Until then, what I saw will remain unknown.